I'm going to walk through a couple of automations that we like to do in cradelogs to help them be more actionable. So I'm going to go back into Echo Demos. You see here I have my different workspaces. I've created a workspace called Demo Webinars, and in there I have my different assets. So you'll see that I have cradelogs, and I've created 2, but I can create more than 2. I can create as many of these as I want. I'm going to go back into our operations cradelog example, and then from here I'm just going to walk through some of the automations that we like to use with cradelogs. Okay. So I already walked through the form, right? The next step is to talk about some of the automations, and we have some basic automations that we include with most of our cradelogs. So the first thing is that we want to go ahead and notify if the assigned to changes. So we want to make sure that if we assigned the crade item, so we assign an action item, if we assign a decision or something to someone, that the person that is the assigned to actually get notified. So if I come in here, I'm just going to walk you through. It's a pretty basic automation in Smartsheet. So we call it the assigned to notification. The assigned to changes to any value. We have the workflow running when triggered. You can also do this daily or weekly. So if you use this very frequently, we actually recommend you do kind of a daily digest. We will show you that every individual can kind of set up their own notifications in Smartsheet. So it's not like if you set this up to trigger that people don't have the power to turn it off. They do as an individual. And then we go ahead and alert someone. And when you go ahead and alert someone in this case, you have a couple of different options, right? So you have the option to send it to a specific person where I'm actually including like an email of a person. So this is what we do when we go ahead and notify if something was escalated. Oftentimes we include a specific person that gets notified. But here we're going to send to a contact in a cell. And what that means is we're going to select a specific column that has a contact in it that we notify. So if you see here, I have 3 different options. You'll notice that these are all contact columns. So this is important. You can only send to a contact column, a contact that is a contact column. So these are my 3 contact columns. I could notify the assigned to, I can notify the reporter, the person that submitted it, or created by. This is important. So for Echo, created by is a system column. So that's a column that if they are logged in, Smartsheet is capturing who that user is and marking who the created by is. If they're not logged in, and we like to publish forms so that people that maybe aren't project managers don't have to necessarily be logged in order to be able to add something, they won't be able to see who the created by is. So that's why we typically include a reporter column. This depends on your organization on if you want them to be able to log in, like have to log in order to do this, or if you want to open this up to people that maybe aren't in Smartsheet day to day. The reporter column is really important if you struggle with visibility in terms of people submit something and then they never get a status request or they never get a status update. You never know what the status is and things like that. So it is important to have the reporter. The other piece we've noticed is that sometimes a manager or a VP or like depending on your organization, what levels you have, will tell someone else to log something. So the other reason that we find this is useful is that the reporter can actually be the person that notified. So even if a project manager maybe is the one that writes it in and it shows created by that, but the reporter is someone that's different. So again, that's another reason why we do it that way. What we've done here is we have customized what the message is. So what we've done is we've created a subject, crade item has been assigned to you, and we have added a field from the actual crade item to include that. So in this case, we've done category, but pretty much any column that you have can be added here. So I could, for example, say description, right? And what that's going to do in the notification is it's actually going to pull through in the subject line of an email or a notification that comes through, right? So anytime you're using these double brackets, see how it's listed here, it will end up pulling through in this. Now, the only thing I'll mention with this is oftentimes I don't include the description in here if it is a situation where they're going to get multiple requests at the same time because it won't bundle them together. The other piece is like when you're sending a notification, you can choose which columns come across in that notification. So you can say message only, You can say all of the sheet fields, or you can only give them specific fields. What's nice about the specific fields is it basically acts like a form. So if I get the notification either in Smartsheet or an email, I can just update the information right from there instead of having to go back to the grid. So I oftentimes will go in here and pick specific columns that I want to do. Some of this is not as important, right? So like a crate ID or something like that, if you're not using the unique identifier much, you might not need to put that here. And there's some information that maybe you don't want them to go ahead and update. So here we go. So that's an example of an assigned to. The other thing is so this is the reporter notification that I mentioned, right? So if something was marked as closed, notifying the reporter. So that's an example. If someone changes assigned to, they notify the person that's assigned to. If there's a due date approaching, so this is something that a lot of organizations that are first adopting this really like, and then they kind of do away with it as they get more comfortable and people are in the system more often, is a due date approaching. So an update request allows them to, again, update that information directly from their email or for their notification or direct them to check on something. Usually it is, what it looks for is, in this case, it's saying every day. And at 5 a.m., it's going to check, but it's not every day that you get a notification about every item. It's only if the due date is in the next 2 days, right? So it's saying every day it's going to check. So it's triggered every single day. It's going to check to see which items are due in the next 2 days. And the status is not closed. So this is really important because a lot of organizations like have started using these notifications and then they just become completely overwhelming and no one actually sees them or uses them effectively. And then it really it really decreases adoption. So make sure that you're identifying how many days before the due date you want to notify them. And make sure that you are keeping track of what the status is because no one wants to get notified of a due date approaching for something that's on hold or closed or backlog. It'll undermine kind of the system experience. And then you're alerting someone, so you're sending it to contacts in the cell. In this case, you're sending it to assigned to, almost due, crate item, and then it tells you what they are. And again, the ability to hear. For the attachment and the comment, I want to show you the comment functionality because we use that oftentimes if we're looking for an update on a crate item and we're managing it there. So let me go ahead, walk through the automations really quickly. Escalation, there's a new assigned to that doesn't have a person. We also use a record date status, so we want to know what date it was closed. We can see that in the cell history, but we can actually use a record date functionality to record a date. So I have a column that says close date. When the status changes to closed, they go ahead and record a date in the close date, whatever that date that closed. So that's a way to kind of keep track of additional information.